tax to GDP ratio, tax to GDP ratio. Now what is good for an economy? See, now our tax to GDP ratio is somewhere near to 9% of GDP. What do you mean by tax to GDP? 9% of GDP means out of, say, if 1 lakh crore is the GDP, 9% of that GDP is we are getting from tax. Okay, so which is good for the economy? Increasing tax to GDP ratio or decreasing tax to GDP ratio? We need the tax to GDP ratio to be high. Then if the tax to GDP ratio is high, what is the benefit for we as a common man? What is the benefit of high tax to GDP ratio? The government taxation, if the government increase, means government is getting more tax, the government can spend more on welfare expenditure. The government can spend on more on welfare expenditure. So the government will allocate more on education, health, then for agriculture, for women friendly policies. So it's very important, it's important for a country like India for the tax to GDP ratio to be high. Now for the tax to GDP ratio to be high, and now again think like this, see, tax to, it's a ratio. Now GDP is increasing, along with that this tax is also increasing. Now if GDP is, this year tax to GDP ratio is 9%, next year GDP have grown by 9%, tax to GDP ratio, if it is again in the same range, it's a great thing, yes or no? Because now the GDP, see, the tax amount have increased by 9%. Why? GDP also have increased. The 9% of that amount is more. Now for this to happen, for tax to GDP ratio, my question is, for that to happen, for the tax to GDP ratio to increase, what economic growth, what role economic growth can play? When an economy is in boom, what do you mean by boom? Economy is growing at a faster rate, double digit rate or more. When there are 9, 10, in India, if the economy is growing at 9 or 10%, we can say that economy is booming, or 10 or 12%, we can say that. So when the economy is growing at a higher rate, what will happen to the tax to GDP ratio? Tax to GDP ratio will increase or decrease? It will increase. When the economy grows, when the economy grow at a higher rate, when the growth rate is high, tax collection increases. Keep this in mind. When the economy is growing, the economy have grown due to several factors. Consumption expenditure have increased, investment expenditure have increased. So when this expenditure or income and personal income have increased, what will happen? The direct tax will increase, indirect tax. See, whenever you expend on consumption expenditure, indirect tax, government is getting more on indirect tax. When you have more income, disposable income, or when you have more personal income, the government is getting more direct tax. So for that to happen, the economy have to grow. So when the economy is growing, when the economic growth is high, tax collection will be high. So that will result in greater tax to GDP ratio. Similarly, now what has happened in the same this quarter collection, tax collection have come down. In this quarter, after demonetization, especially normally December 15th is a advance tax payment period. Government have collected less tax, direct tax. Reason is, see, already the business thing have changed. The economy, see, it's a sign of, see, try to understand that when the economy is going at a slower rate, when the economy slows means the expenditure have come down, income have come down. That will result in lesser taxes for the government, and that will have an impact on tax to GDP ratio also. So the best way of increasing the tax to GDP ratio is we need to ensure that first we need to ensure that the economy have to grow at a higher rate. Second thing is that then we have to prevent, that we will be discussing in this regard, the second steps, few steps regarding how to ensure that the government can collect more taxes. That we will be discussing under public finance, because tax related things we will be discussing under public finance only. But for time being, try to understand that economic growth and tax to GDP ratio, how it is related. When the economic growth rate is high, naturally it will have an impact on tax to GDP ratio. So this is a very important indicator, like like inflation index, inflation rate is a very important indicator. GDP growth rate is a very important indicator. Tax to GDP ratio is also very important indicator. All these things shows that what is the situation of our economy. Then there are so many indicators, macroeconomic indicators, which we will be discussing. Okay. Now think about this way. Now whether the economic growth rate have a direct influence over inequality. Can you say that when the economy is growing, inequality will come down, or when the economy is slowing down, whether is there any direct relation between economic growth and income inequality? No, there is no direct relation. For that to happen, government intervention is required. Government have to directly intervene to ensure what? In order to reduce inequality, between the rich and poor, along with the, to an extent economic growth will happen. Now try to understand, economy have grown by 10%. The majority of the benefit will go to whom? To the rich class only. Poor will get. So now what will happen to their disparity, inequality level? Rich, it will. So till this point of time, so we want to avoid that, or rather we are not able to bridge this gap. At least we want to ensure that the people who are excluded from this growth are included. That's why the government is coming with several policies in relation to inclusive growth. Just have an idea that we can't guarantee. That's why when a country, diverse country like India with a huge population, it's very difficult to intervene and ensure inequality from the government side or from the growth side. For that to happen, the state, the civil society and other things have to ensure that the poor people benefit from the economic growth, but state intervention is very important. Just have an idea. Now try to answer the second question. A decrease in tax to GDP ratio, of a country indicates, it's just only indication, which of the following? You can say that slowing economic growth rate is an indication. Can we say that there is less equitable distribution of national income? No, we can't say that. Now try to understand that regarding taxation I will discuss in more, in the sense that regarding direct tax and indirect tax, just giving an hint, there is a tax called indirect tax which treat equally the rich and the poor. Indirect tax is imposed on everyone. Both the rich and poor are affected by indirect tax. But direct tax, it is impacting only the rich people. Who have income only have to pay income tax. Those who are not having income, they don't need to pay any income tax. But think about excise duty. We talked about this biscuit or bread, if any small item, any items, packed item or anything, if a poor man is also buying, he have to pay that indirect tax. So in our tax revenue, indirect tax is almost near to 50% of tax collection. So we can't say in relation to tax to GDP ratio whether how it will be affecting the equitable distribution of the national income. So we can't say. So second statement is wrong.